5. October 878. In distance, that cold foggy morning the island loomed, a darker fuzzy grey compared to the sea sky's paler one. They had travelled for 2 months, Domhnall and Constantine's party, spreading the news of Ivar the Boneless's slaughter, telling the Cymric they met how Eochaid had distinguished himself and fought bravely, when at Gaelish settlements, particularly more frequent the further west they travelled, the son of Saenid Mac Alpin had done the bloody deed. With both communities, the news of Ivar's death was particularly welcome. Few had not lost sons, fathers or brothers to the Norse axe, few had not had to flee while the Norse stole their land. A good, warm meal, men, Domhnall declared, as the dark grey smudge came into focus. That's what welcome awaits us at Iona. Osrith, who had been sleeping, curled up in sheepskins, shuddered as the boat reverberated from a change of current, the men cheering at the anticipated rest. Constantine, who was at the prow next to Domhnall, noticed her move, but did not turn round. There had been words. They had been spoken loudly and abruptly. One night, after the party had camped on a sheltered hillside just south of Stirling, Domhnall had instructed Constantine to wash the pewter plated in the stream and then feed the horses. His cousin had sneered at the instruction and had made to wrap up in his wool blanket. Domhnall had taken the blanket and thrown it into one of the overhanging ash trees before tipping Constantine's ale into the earth, pushing him to the ground and cursing his loiter-sackness, demanding to know why he was a lubberwort, a Quisby, not fit to call himself of the house Alpin. Constantine was gathering the plates as Domhnall made to strike him again, putting his arm up as Osrith made to pick up the task which was, ordinarily hers, telling her that she was never to do his work again. She watched as Constantine was ordered on to night guard duty, wrapping herself up near the fire as the stars decorated the sky, before getting to her feet. "Just go away," Constantine complained, as she made to talk to him. In the moonlight his face contorted, as if tortured by an internal fight. "Just," Osrith made to leave, then doubled back to around the other side of the horses. "I think you're fit for the house Alpin," she whispered, then pushed the pewter tankard towards him. Constantine grasped it, then looked down at her, his usual sneering before taking it firmly in his fist and draining it. That had been nearly a month ago. Domhnall had been strict in his resolve to train his cousin, giving him the worst jobs, catching and skinning the rabbits, digging out a privy, groom the horses of the mud they had encountered on the banks of the mighty Clyde River. And beyond, Domhnall pointed out, in that green hollow, our kin, the house of Arthgaal, that of our aunt. He took Constantine and grabbed him exultantly by the shoulders, "is our shelter for the night." King Eochaid was not at all surprised to find his cousins at his fortress gate that day, and gave the party on progress a hearty welcome. "Won't they suspect something?" Osrith asked Finolai, as they stabled the horses. "No more than we might suspect something," Finolai replied. "We must behave as if nothing whatsoever concerns us with respect to any kind of uprising. We go to pray, at Iona," Domhnall had explained to Eochaid. "At the feast laid on," clapping the backs of one another as a dusting of snow laid over the courtyard. "And they cannot lay hands on us there." "Yes, but the Norse can," whipped back Fergus, the broad, red-headed warrior not much older than Constantine. Domhnall smiled. "The monks deal with that," he replied. "Money works. And it has never been so well off compared to the devastation at Lindisfarne, with poor St. Cuthbert taken out and on progress of its own." Eochaid, Osrith considered. Her family at Bibbenberg were good at 2 things, one was siege fortifications, the other was examining the rulers in the kingdoms north, to anticipate likely attacks. His mother was daughter of Saenid Mac Alpin, Domhnall and Constantine's father's sister and sister of Malmuir. This man had turned the tide on battle against the Norse, had Eochaid not charged, with blood-curdling cries far louder than that of the Norse, and they left, shaking hands with the king who had helped them so much on the battlefield. Was it true that there could be such a plot? Yet, as she went to the kitchens after serving at the feast, finding a comfortable nook in which to huddle for the night, the warriors were being introduced to a Pictish warrior, who had feasted with them. She huddled down, but her weary eyes would not lock into the blissful rest of sleep. That man. There was something about him. In the darkness, Osrith stared at the dimming ashes of the fire. Though Achade was the king of the Strathclyde, it was he who seemed to be dominating the conversation, calling for more wine and discussing politics with Domhnall. The warmth of the fire and the fibers of the wool eventually conspired to lead Osrith to slumber, but not before the mental image of the man, skin tight over his face, eyes deep set and looking, ever watchful. A hand covered Osrith's face, causing her to wake after several hours' sleep. It was still dark, snow was still falling, and the fingers were tight about her face. "It's Finolai," the young warrior hissed. "Bring your blanket, your sword, get your shoes on. We go." Osrith heard him turn into darkness, the leather on his boots scraping on the cold stone floor. A call was indistinct, but Finolai clearly heard it and hissed, "Here." A side door was unlocked, which led from the kitchen to the courtyard. A dog huffed in its sleep, twitching in the moonlight, dreaming. "Come on," he urged, as boot leather scraped the layer of fresh fallen snow off the courtyard stones. Osrith rubbed her eyes. She was half in a daze of being woken up so suddenly, even more so at being woken still further by the tiny brushes of snowflakes. Finolai was now inside the stables, arousing the warriors. Fergus appeared, nodded in acknowledgement to Finolai, disappearing then reappearing with a dishevelled Constantine. "You can't go back for it," Fergus yelled, as Constantine looked for one of his boots, which he had dropped by the stable yard. Finolai grabbed Osrith's shoulder in the shoulder. He was right too, as Osrith would have got it for him, so he could slip it on and not have to walk in the courtyard with the snow with one bare foot. Achade's guards had chased them to the river where, it turned out, Domhnall had pre-organized boats to collect them, that slipped away in the black of the October night. Horses abandoned but next safe as Gaelish pilots swung them into the Clyde estuary, around Arran and north, to the place Osrith had pretended to be heading, for safety, with the pilgrims. A day and a night on the little boat in rough seas made all who were travelling long to be by a hearth again with food in his stomach and, as a monk with a painter rope stood in the rocky jetty that served Iona, Finolai leapt into the shallow water to slip it around the prow of the party's little boat. 88,888,888. A prayer to offer peace to the travelling warriors around a welcome hot and soporific fire. Fish was served to them as it was the lead-up to All Saints' Day, and the abbot of the monastery heard all of Domhnall's stories, about the battle and the celebration, and that they were here for blessing from the most holy Saint Columba. Or at least, that's what Domhnall was keeping to. Monks gossiped, monasteries sent missives about the comings and goings of kings at least as often as they did about the holy. Osrith knew. That had been a shrewd move on his part. "We go in peace to the Uineal," Domhnall said, as they drank the island brewed ale. "No peace if the Norse come here," remarked Fergus, drinking deeply. "This is a monastery, to them it's easy wealth." The abbot appeared to consider this. "The Norse come rarely. It's true, they often raid. But more common is that they want to trade. It is my opinion," the great tonsured holy man offered, "that they want to settle and share in our community. Several have come for baptism." "For how long?" scoffed Domhnall. "To them, it's a day off raiding and, exchange for wetting they get new clothes." "True, very true," accepted the abbot, his eyes amused. Then he asked that Domhnall take a very precious set of manuscripts of the Gospels for safekeeping. Finlaiath, the king of the northern Uineal, commissioned these. They are almost finished. But, through the raids you mention, I do fear their destruction. The monks at Tara or Kells have enough of the requisite skills to complete them. They were shown to the stables, and to an overhanging, straw-covered attic platform. "Your warriors should be warm enough here," the abbot told them. All climbed up, Osrith glowing a little at being mistaken for warrior. She threw down her blanket into a corner near the slatted roof, stars beginning to twinkle. Yet, Osrith knew that her appearance was that of a warrior. In their steady, but watchful traverse from the east in Pitland to the west in Strathclyde, she had plaited her hair like them, Finolai drawing her hair back in one long braid like a Gaelish warrior after a particularly stormy journey over the higher country near Scone. She had had time to try a horse, much to everyone's amusement. and she had fought them all. For Domhnall explained that not one of them could defend her if they were attacked, something Osrith was pleased about, for she had grown to love fighting. Not for her the clumsy thrust of defense, but the art of it, making the most use of the least action, to conserve strength. To spend leisure time ensuring that skills were honed and tactics learned until they were part of the muscle itself. Not everyone, not Constantine. He had not initiated a duel, once on their journey, and nor had Osrith. He was still angered by her. A monk with a painter rope stood in the rocky jetty that served Iona. Finoli leapt into the shallow water to slip it around the prow of the party's little boat. Just as Osrith was about to settle down for the night, she felt a dampness on her legs. Cursing to herself, she picked her way around the already sleeping Constantine and Fergus, climbing down the ladder and out into the monastery's courtyard. The horse's drinking trough would have clean enough, before she packed herself with the moss that she always made sure she carried. The horses were settled for the night. Hay had made them as contented as the fish and ale had for the warriors. They stood still, their hooves unmoving on the hard earth of their stalls. One quick, practiced movement and she was clean and secure. Osrith was just pulling up her breeches and drawing them in when she saw them. Crouching low, she watched, not daring to move, wondering whether she should see. She closed her eyes tight, and leaned back down by the legs of the horses. After a time, the rhythmical noise slowed, and then stopped. Osrith opened her eyes. 2 feet passed by the end of the first horse stall, misstepped a little, then Finoli's boots strode past her. Osrith peered further forward, around their wood between the horses. Whoever the other was needed to go to? But the man was not in the corner, where once he had been. Instead, he was behind her. He pulled Osrith to her feet, then hit her in the face, making her fall to the floor. Osrith, pain radiating from the impact, lunged low for his legs. Osrith! Domhnall exclaimed, the fight going out of him. Osrith! Osrith stopped too, and cleared out from Domhnall's legs, getting to her feet and brushing the straw from his hair. She made to stride past him. You saw. Osrith turned. A steely look on the warrior's face was held with effort. I saw. Or rather, I heard. Domhnall stepped towards her, yet not blocking her path. She could go. What were you doing here? Looking for Constantine? He's in the hail oft. Osrith nodded. I needed to Washington. Ordinarily, the king in waiting for the Pictish throne would not have troubled himself with her business. She was nothing more than a moderately good fighter who his petulant cousin had insisted travel with them. She would not have explained. And yet, she had witnessed. You cannot say what you saw, Domhnall pressed. It is a grave sin for which I should burn, for which I should suffer. For which I have put to men death. Worse, my reputation, and that of the house Alpin would be destroyed? Yes, thought Osrith. Reputation was all. Family was all. A fleeting cloud of a memory, of her brother, of Bicca, passed over the landscape of her mind. I had my eyes closed, she replied, searching his face. You both seemed happy doing it. It is sinful. We are mere mortals following the word of God. Yet, did he not bring down his vengeance on Sodom and Gomorrah? Yes, Osrith agreed. Yet, she considered, the holy scriptures used had been put together by Romans, not angels. Did they not have their own interests behind which instructive books wait to be included? The Lindisfarne monks knew that. They were still St. John Christian adherents at heart, even though Augustine Christianity was the official church structure now, thanks to her ancestor Oswy, at Whitby. As were the Pictish and Gaelish churches. One God, many fragments of the whole, like a mirror shattered, with a view from each individual slightly different. Because, it could be viewed, should it be necessary, that Finoli had offended you so gravely that you chose a forceful lesson to be given, in order to correct. Domhnall looked at her for what seemed like a long time, then laughed sporadically, as he considered her words. He sank to the straw, his black hair gleaming with perspiration. Osrith noticed for the first time that he was breathing heavily. Constantine is learning, Domhnall sighed, catching his breath again, looking exhausted, down at the straw. What you and Senid conspired. That was shameful, and he knew it. Then there is no real reason for me to be here, Osrith prompted. I am at Iona, where I wanted to be. But without my family. And, from here, she could offer to work for the monks. She may get access to correspondence. She may discover where Bouquet was, she may hear of Utad. Is that what you want? Domhnall asked, suddenly turning his head. To serve in a monastery. I want to be a warrior. Osrith hadn't meant to say it aloud, but here, with this Gaelish prince at his most vulnerable, his most intimate, it didn't seem foolish to say it. And, to be with Utad. But unless she could make some wealth, or return to Dunnottar, where her own treasure hoard was, under the rocks under the trickling stream, there was little chance even if she did know where he was. Ultimately, Osrith had come to realize, little by little, in her unconscious mind, that being a warrior was security, was comradeship and, on occasions, meant wealth. Can a woman be a warrior? You are, Domhnall replied, chuckling faintly. Women do. Norse and Danish women regularly are. Many fought against us in the great battle. He looked up to Osrith, and looked intently at her. But to be a warrior and a Christian you cannot be like a Norse woman, you must be chaste. Do you know what I mean? Not to sly with a man? Osrith felt the weight of conflict on her mind. She never wanted to he humped, she'd sworn she would fight any man who tried. Yet, she had not fought Constantine. She had permitted his lying with her by not resisting. Domhnall got to his feet, and began to pace as he talked and emphasizing his speech by waving his arms, in the way she would come to recognize in Constantine. Warriors do not carry the consequences of being unchaste when they lie with a woman. If you want to be a warrior, and you could, you are strong, you are swift, you behave as Gale would. You dive straight into battle without hesitation. He paused, looking at Osrith, at her fair, warm hair, her blue eyes. She was about as far from a Gale in features as would be possible to get. You can anticipate and use strategy. You are cool-headed and do not flinch at combat. For this, you cannot be with child. As well as the drain on your body, no lord would take your oath. For it would always conflict with the safety of the child and pose a weakness in his defenses. He looked at her inanimate face, as she thought this over. Do you understand? Osrith nodded, the cold night air swirling at the stable entrance. That made sense. A warrior or a mother. Be humped or be chaste. It was clear to her, like the sun on a cloudless day, humping was something she could forego. The man seemed content after the act, as Domhnall had. Having humped Finolai. What benefit was there for a woman, then, other than the risk of pregnancy and the risk of death in childbirth? Except for the need to increase a family, men lying with men was a practice that should be encouraged, for it could benefit everyone. Then it is chastity, Osrith concluded, now sinking down next to Domhnall, feeling a glow of pride as she realized how this Gaelish prince of the Picts had praised her warriorness. Yet, she had never heard the word strategy, and told him so. Strategy is thinking ahead, Domhnall explained. Predicting the actions of your enemies, and not only your enemies but your friends, who may well become your enemies. Osrith frowned. In what way? What did you notice about Eochaid's fortress, in the green hollow by the Clyde? Domhnall asked, patiently. It's October, Osrith considered, clenching her damaged hand to relieve the cold from it. It's the end of the fighting season. It's almost Samhain. Most of his warriors should be resting and the servants working hard. Osrith ran through her memories of 2 days ago in her mind. Yet, for there were few servants, most of their warriors were not resting. The horses were on their rich hay food, needed for long distances. These are not people lying fallow. Strategy. Domhnall concluded. It suggests the rumors of a conspiracy to overthrow are true. That man. Osrith said, suddenly. Those eyes, ever watchful, like a hawk, choosing its prey. Laying his eyes on Osrith's face, as if deciding, shall I eat you? Or are there tastier morsels? She looked at Domhnall and narrowed her eyes. Is that why we ran? But Domhnall had got to his feet and was making for the stable door. Wait. Domhnall MacAlpin turned slowly, his body taut. But then his face softened, the scent of sweat and salt wafting from his hot body. You are not my warrior. You are ... nothing. He bore down on Osrith angrily, knocking into a bay, which awoke with a shrill whinny. Nothing but Northumbrian scum. Osrith had her hand in Feda's sword now. Domhnall narrowed his eyes. What do you think you'll do with that? Be your ancillary. Osrith spat out, while it was on her tongue. Like the Britons for the Romans. I am not Gaelish, nor Pictish. But, I can still offer ... fealty. After all, you sheltered me, fed me, gave me easy work. You might have turned me away even after helping Constantine. She pulled her sword out to the tip. Of course I would aspire to be your warrior. And to their surprise, Osrith's most of all, she sank to her knees. Domhnall MacAlpin looked down at her. Then, he knelt too, kneeling opposite her, taking her sword wrist, and held it firmly, pushing her sword back into its scabbard. No, the prince said, shaking his head. But I thank you. One day, you will be a credit to a lord, ha. He laughed. You may even be a lord yourself. Then, drawing her back into the stall, away from the horse settling down to sleep again, he told Osrith all he supposed. Giric is a member of the Northern Sanloen, of Moray, towards Fort Iru, Domhnall explained, then dipped his head close to Osrith's face. He has the ear of the Ochade. He has land in the central and north of the country, which is constantly pressed by the Norse. Giric wants the Pictish throne, he wants the southern land for his own, but he knows few people will support him for he is not royal. But, by manipulating our young cousin, he can make his connivings legitimate. Domhnall sighed. It's all becoming very clear, very clear. Then, we left just in time, Osrith murmured. God-given, Domhnall concluded, but his voice sounded bitter, regretful. He walked towards the stables, and held open the slatted door. Now go, Osrith of Northumbria, the prince commanded. Go, sleep. Take your rest, save your strength, for we must travel tomorrow, though it is Samhain. We must not offend the Sahib. As Osrith stepped into a swirl of snow, she stopped and made to ask what he meant. What was Savin? Who were the she? But Domhnall had sunk onto a hay bale, sword resting on his lap. As she climbed into the hay loft, stepping across a silently huffing Fergus, and an equally still Finoli, Osrith was aware of a rustle of straw by the opposite wall. In the gloom she recognized Constantine's leather jerkin, turning back with its owner to the wooden sloping roof of the loft, thinking well on what his cousin had asked him to consider. Stealthy snowflakes sneaked through careless gaps to leave lumpy deposits on his blanket.